3, 2. Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. This is episode 14 and we are moving forward. This week Mitch joins me from Planet 5D. Mitch, what have you been up to, man?
This is Planet 5D. No, it's not. It's DSLR Film Noob Podcast. It's not Planet 5D, but we're going to play with some new sounds this week and see how well this works out.
Mitch has got an entire soundboard over there now. And
yeah, it's all in software, too, so I had it crash on me earlier today, so good Lord, let's pray that doesn't happen.
Well, myself, I've been in the medical experiment category all day long.
Yeah.
I started at 8 this morning, and here's my secret medical ID bracelet testing and probing and everything else. Don't worry, I'm healthy. Found out
He's
that
been
I'm
probed.
And I'm not pregnant, so let's get that out of the way.
Was it an alien probe, or was it just a normal probe?
Oh, man. Every time you do one of these, your yearly physical is just kind of like, you're not really up for it, but you're supposed to do it because it makes you healthy, and I do it, so apparently it keeps me healthy. I don't know. On that note, anything else exciting going on, Mitch, before we roll into the news?
Well, let me just tell you, cars suck. I hate cars.
You're still having car problems?
Oh yeah, it was bad last week, and it's gone from bad to worse. I spent $900 on getting it fixed this week. Drove it home. Drove it the next day. Guess what? The speedometer doesn't work, and now the check engine light is back on. So I'm like really fit to be tied. I spent $900 to get the check engine light to go off. Friend of mine said, just put a piece of black tape right there on your dashboard and fix it that way. It's a lot cheaper that way.
Yeah, vehicles can always be an issue, man.
Yes.
I pay for the warranty when I get a new car, so that way they continue to take care of it until I trade it in for something else. I didn't used to do that, but anymore I don't want to have to worry about it. And they got this super awesome clause where if your car breaks down, they just give you a rental the whole time. So then you're good to go until your vehicle is fixed.
Uh-huh. And you're paying for it through the nose, but that's okay.
Yeah, I am. On that note, time for the news. Time for the news. This seems to be a lens week here. We've got a lot of lenses to cover and a lot of different companies talking about new lenses. First up on the list is Kowa Prominar M4 lenses. They were announced earlier this week, and it looks like a company that was formerly known for their CCTV lenses is now going to be releasing 3 new manual focus M4 lenses. We've got an 8.5 f2.8, we've got a 12mm f1.8, and a 25mm f1.8. These lenses are pretty interesting, and if you take a look at the show notes, you'll see that they have multiple colors that you don't normally see on any lenses. Green is a good example here. One of their lenses is green. At first I was shocked, but now it's kind of starting to grow on me. I kind of actually do like the green and black combo. I'm not a hunter or anything like that, but man, that's a nifty looking thing and a bit different. Expected pricing on this is going to be somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $1,700. The only pricing I could actually find were European prices, so that's a convert to American dollars right now, and I believe the exchange is like 1.3 or 1.4, so that could be in flux. No word yet on the actual date for release, but they are starting to show these off. Mitch, what do you think about these guys?
Well, if you've never seen a green lens, it's about time, right? I know you're really excited about them. I mean, my star is an 8.5mm. That's pretty wide.
Yes, it is. The wide one is probably the most interesting to me, but it's still f2.8, and you know, with the Olympus 7 to 14 f2.8 coming later this year, I might hold out for that because that's also going to be in the probably $1,500 to $1,600 range. And one prime versus a zoom, I'll probably go with a zoom if they're both f2.8.
I know you'll go with them all. Come on, tell us the truth. And you'll go green on all of them, right? So they all 3 come in green, silver, or black. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is interesting. The zoom ring on these guys, or excuse me, the focus ring on these guys looks pretty similar to the stuff that you find on the Voigtlander lenses, and the build and shape of these is also pretty similar to those and some of the SLR Magic lenses that you see in the manual focus M4 III format. So if you're in the market for something really wide, I believe these are going to hit Europe first, and then they'll be coming to the United States at some point in the future. Moving on down the line to even more lens announcements, Sony has announced a new range of E-mount, and these are full-frame lenses. We've got a 28mm f2 for $450. We've got a 35mm f1.4 for $1,600. We've got a 90mm f2.8 macro for $1,100, and then a super zoom 24 to 240mm 3.5 to 6.5 at $1,000. Mitch, full frame lenses, are these gonna start sort of competing with Canon's offerings?
Well, you know, for the Sony A7S, these would be perfect. And I'm sure they're going to be sucked up by a lot of people who are getting those particular cameras because Sony's starting to put out a lot of full frame cameras these days.
I'm looking at the pricing, and that's probably the biggest negative for me. Anything that Sony releases with the word Zeiss stamped on the side of it seems to double or triple the actual cost of the lens. One of the ones I've always had my eye on is the Sony 55mm f1.8, but then it's an f1.8, and the Nikon and Canon 50mm f1.8s are what, like $100, $120? And I know
Right.
this is metal and it's got better lensing and stuff like that, but it's a $700 lens because it says Zeiss across it, and that's it's really frustrating for me. I still don't actually own any native E-mount full-frame lenses for the Sony A7S. I've been adapting or using those Minolta lenses. I am interested maybe in the 28mm, but as we fly through all these lens announcements, one of the things that is interesting about full-frame Sony E-mount lenses is that the folks over at DP Review basically did an interview with the CEO of Sigma, and he mentioned the possible release of some Sony E-mount lenses from Sigma's art line of lenses. And I've got the questions and answers here. The question they asked, let me see, I'll start from the beginning. A lens like Sony's Zeiss 55mm f1.8 from the FE-mount is optically superb, but quite small and light. If you were to design art lenses for that system, would you try to strike a different balance between quality and size? His answer was yes, and that right there is the shining bit about possibly getting some lenses, and I think that's kind of what they're hanging their hat on. But he goes on to say that they also have different segments where interest might be more motivated by the size or offerings. Sony already has a 55mm f1.8, which is nicer sized and reasonably priced, so why make another? Instead, maybe we could offer an f1.4 compared to an f1.8. That's a huge difference, so we're either making f1.4 or something different. It sounds to me like they're coming right out and saying we are planning on making some E-mount lenses in the future. Do you use any of, or have you used any of the Sigma art lenses?
No.
None at all? You haven't even
No.
played around with them?
We've talked about that before. No, I'm a Canon guy, okay? Although the more I talk about it, the more I'm interested in the Olympus, which we'll talk about later in this particular wonderful show. But at this point, I've just been a Canon guy. Sorry.
No problem. The Sigma lenses, I've used a few of the Art Series lenses. They're 50-1.4 and they're 85-1.4. Both of those are pretty good. There was an issue with the original 50mm f1.4 from Sigma in the focusing department. Some people reported back focus issues with the 50-1.4 original, and now with all the Art Series lenses, Sigma has released a little USB tethered mount that you can use to fine-tune the lens for your camera. There hasn't been a lot of complaints from people on their 35 f1.4, their 50 f1.4, and I believe they're going to be releasing a 85-1.4 art version that will also have those corrections built in. I'm excited about these for Sony cameras because these lenses are in the $450 to $700 range, and they're all really decent primes, f1.4 all the way across the board, and that's cheaper than the Zeiss lenses that are offered. I don't need the Zeiss label on my lens, and I know that they do make good optics, but I think I would rather have a set of medium-priced primes for my A7S that are native as opposed to going with the more expensive Sony versions of those lenses.
Well, I know you're very excited about low-cost lenses, and I know there are also quite a few people who are very excited about Zeiss lenses. We recently have done a couple of surveys on Planet 5D, and Zeiss is coming in pretty well. I think last week when we talked about the survey that I sent out about lenses was that Canon was #1, Sigma was actually coming in as #2, and Zeiss was #3 for our readers
Oh,
in
wow.
terms of popularity. So there are a lot of people that love Zeiss lenses. They're incredibly sharp, but like my father always used to say, you get what you pay for. Sometimes, not always. You could get some good lenses. I know you've got a lot of good lenses that are pretty cheap.
Yeah, my collection's all over the place, but one of the things I'm happy with Sigma in their whole art system is that they've moved away from. Have you ever felt one of the old Sigma lenses? They had like a
No.
really gross coating on them. Whatever it was, it felt like almost like dry paper with like little lumps on it. Like somebody had done bad wall spackle on the lens cover and casing, and they felt kind of gross and kind of cheap. These new Art Series lenses, they've kind of added a smooth finish to them and really cleaned up the design and the look. There was nothing wrong with the original crop sensor 30mm f1.4, other than when you touched the lens, it felt kind of gross because it was rough and sort of like powdery feeling. The new version of that basically has very similar, if not the same, optics, but it now has the smoother, nicer looking finish. And if you're trying to blend in these Sigma lenses with your Canon lenses, paint one red stripe around it, and with the new look, you might even be able to get away with it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Paint a
But
red stripe on it, and everybody will think it's a Canon L, right?
yeah, I think that's where. Well, actually, Rokinon and Samyang, Samyang, however you pronounce that, those two brands. One of them has a silver line around it to look like Nikon's premium lenses, and the other one has a red line all the way around it to look like Canon's premium lenses. So they are kind of actually doing the look at me, I got a red stripe too.
Yeah, yeah. And soon we'll be in multiple colors, right? Green, silver, blue. Have you ever seen, by the way, while we were talking about the green lenses, I forgot to talk about the fact that you can get wraps. Have you ever seen these lens wraps where you can put like camouflage and
Yeah, I
uh,
have actually.
labels?
There's jungle wraps, and there's also insulated wraps for a good example is the 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8. That's a honker of a lens, and it's white. So if you're trying to, I don't know, hide in the forest or do some sort of wildlife photography, I've seen a lot of photographers that will wrap that, and they have two types. They have one that's like a cushy kind of sleeve thing, and I don't know if it's made out of the or not Kevlar, but the stuff Gore-Tex, the stuff that keeps things warm. I've heard some people say there's a Gore-Tex version. I don't know if that's the case, but there's also kind of a decal version. Have you seen the decal one where it's just stickers that basically like stick all the way to your lens?
Yeah, I mean, you can actually get your own website brand put on some of those, and it looks kind of funky.
It would be kind of cool to do your lens up as something else, like a coffee cup, or that's the only thing clever I can think of right off the top of my head. So.
Well, put some art on there, make it a tattoo, like your skin, right?
Yeah, and for the insulated versions, I don't really know. Have you ever had a situation where your lens got cold enough that it actually affected its operation?
It depends. I know a lot of the like astrophotographer kind of guys have warmers that they use because they're spending, an hour outside, 2 hours, several hours taking long exposures. Ditto Gear actually was selling a product for a while, and I don't know if they still do, where they were created a heater so that your lens wouldn't fog up because with all the moisture and condensation and stuff. But a typical use, you and I don't think are to do it, but even like going to Antarctica, I think the lenses are going to be so cold, the whole things are going to freeze up.
Yeah, I've never had freezing weather affect my camera other than fogging over. And the fogging over is an issue if you're going from inside shooting to outside shooting. But for that, I just carry one of the terry cloth, the cleaners, to wipe it off until it kind of stabilizes in temperature outside and stops, sweating. I don't know what that does to the inside of my camera. It's probably not good, but I haven't suffered the repercussions of that yet. So no
Well,
mold or mildew.
the only mold and mildew I have is on my Tamron lens. It's over here on the shelf that's still sitting there that went through one of the water rides at an amusement park with me, and and that didn't turn out very well.
I've actually splashed my Micro Four Thirds camera a few times, my GH4, that Olympus 12 to 40 millimeter f2.8 that I use on it quite regularly. I took that through a waterfall when I first got it while I was in Iceland testing it out, and it held up really well to water. The only thing is, I was on a shoot on the beach about 4 months ago, and I was shooting something that was kind of along the sand, and I was by the water, and the wave picked up and splashed me and the entire camera, and I was able to get it dried off really quick, and it didn't affect the lens. But now the hot shoe on my GH4 is a bit suspect. There's a couple of spots up there where it looks like there's some oxidization. It's got that like kind of white chalky stuff on it. And I don't use anything electrical on the hot shoe anymore because I don't want to break it. But it's a little bit weird. But it held up to salt water, so I mean the GH4 is still a little bit well sealed, probably almost as good as my 5D Mark II was, I suppose.
Yeah, it's salt water is definitely hell on any kind of gear. Totally.
Yeah, one of the things, and kind of since we're off topic anyway, the Olympus lenses have a better sealing system, from what I understand, than the Panasonic lenses. If you ever held the Olympus and the Panasonic zooms in your hand, the equivalent, the Panasonic is a 12 to 35, and the Olympus is a 12 to 40. The Olympus is much more substantial. It's all metal, and it feels really solid, where the Panasonic is kind of plasticky. And in your advertisements for Olympus lenses, they have all these like, we have seals here, and we have seals here, and seals are over there, and they're inside the lens, and don't worry, this is rated for dust and water and everything else. So I don't know if any of my Panasonic lenses would have held up to the same hit from the salt water that the Olympus lens did, but the Olympus lens, other than having a slight it doesn't turn as smoothly as it did when I first got it for zooming, but otherwise it's held up pretty well. So good job, Olympus, on your weather sealing.
Yay!
Moving on down the line, we've got more lenses. This is the Canon 11 to 24 millimeter f4. This is a $3,000, $2,800, something like that lens. Pretty expensive, but take a look at the show notes when you get a chance and look at the real world tests. The lines at 11 millimeter are pretty darn straight in this. You don't get any of that sort of fisheye effect on the side. It is pretty sexy. Petapixel and a few other places, I believe DP Review also has some images up. One of the things that they point out in their article about this lens, and you should also look at the comparisons because this thing is a monster. It is very fat. But for real estate photographers, if you do a lot of stuff with a real estate agent, a lot of times they want you to make small places look huge.
Right.
And at 11 millimeters, you can make a tiny little living room with a couch look like just a amphitheater worth of space. And they've got some examples here where he's shooting with the 14 millimeter f2.8 and then with the 11 millimeter range on the 11 to 24, and the room does look substantially bigger. I mean, it's ridiculous how wide that 11 makes the room look. Mitch, do you do any real estate photography? I'm just throwing random stuff at it.
Yeah, you're just throwing everything at me today. No, I'm not doing any real estate photography. But I was talking with my buddy Craig, who runs Canon Rumors, yesterday on Skype, and he also runs, I don't know if you know this, but he also runs Lens Rentals of Canada.
Oh, I did not know
And
that.
yeah, it's actually his wife is running that business. But and I'm sorry, I should do the cash register. There it is. Um, he just got in the new Canon 11 to 24, and he was just really excited about it. And the Petapixel article that you've shown here in the show notes is just head over heels excited about this lens. So and the samples there are very incredible. It looks like the room is about twice as big as it probably is.
Yeah, it is really sweet. This is another thing where I just love wide angle, and if this lens was not as expensive as it is, I would jump on it right away. Unfortunately, at almost $3,000, I can probably buy some other gear that's slightly more important to my collection than this 11 to 24 f4. But I still want it. I still
Yeah.
want to have it. I
Well,
might have to rent this guy.
it's kind of funny because the one picture on the Petapixel site where they show you the beer can or the soda can that's on the
Oh
table,
yeah.
and then it looks like light years away from the lens, and then they did an iPhone photo of how close the camera really was, and it's like 2 or 3 inches away from the soda can. It's like crazy.
Yeah, the focus distance on this is pretty close. I was
Yeah.
surprised how close they were able to get it to that can to take that shot. That's one awesome thing to do if you have a really wide angle lens and you have pets, to get that crazy pet shot where dogs and cats in general like to investigate things that are in front of them. So if you take your wide angle lens as wide as it'll go and get close to them and stay in that focal range, you can
Yep.
focus on their nose, and it just gives you this crazy, like, the world is huge around them, and the dog perspective, it's pretty cool shot. And there's a lot of other things you can use that for. Real estate is a great example. I have been drooling over this lens since they announced it. I am not going to buy it, but if I find a good enough excuse to rent this lens, I will probably call in a favor or just pay for the rental. One of those things, and this is actually a side note here. I was talking to somebody last week. They sent me in a question, and they wanted to know basically what they should do for this funeral that was coming up. At first, I sent my condolences. And I said, hey, that's really sad. But what he wanted to know was the funeral was going to be the close family members, because the person that had passed away was in an area that was kind of inconvenient for the rest of the family to get to. So he was going to be taking pictures of everything, and he was agonizing and debating. He had, I believe he had a 70D, and he was thinking about buying a D70D100 from Nikon, because he had some Nikon lenses around to cover this special family event. And I told him, hey, forget about those cameras completely. Don't go buy a new camera. Go to one of these rental places, and for about $50 you can rent a 6D body. For another $50 or $55 you can rent a 24 to 70, and then for another $20 or $30 you can rent the 50mm f1.4. And there's even a little bit of room, a wiggle room in there to maybe add like a flash unit if you need to, or something like that. And your total cost is going to be $160 or so. And these lens rental places, lensrental.com is one of them. Borrowers has a good program. There's a lot of places out there, and they can send you that awesome kit to go cover whatever life event that you have. And sure, it's $200, but then you have the right tools, you have the best lenses you can get, and he was going to use kit lenses. So, I mean, why would you go with the kit lens when you can get a hold of some of this stuff? And I don't think enough people consider renting. Renting lenses is such an easy way to go when you just need something for a small project. And filmmakers and everybody else, man, it's like, well, you were saying you have these family events that you like to cover. Do you rent any lenses? Like you were talking about wanting a little bit more reach. What about the 200 to 400? I mean, rent that, bring it in, and just shoot the heck out of the people on the field.
I have actually done that several times. Well, like at my daughter's dance recital, I rented several lenses to get in there and to be able to shoot. Especially in an auditorium where it's dark, I needed the really fast lenses. People do not realize. the difference is though is and as a plug, I seem to be stumbling a lot today. I don't know what's wrong with my brain. Maybe it's because it's afternoon instead of morning.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. Lens Pro to Go is one of my favorite places. There's a plug, and I looked into renting at my local brick and mortar shop, and I would love to support my local shop, but with lensrentals.com and all of these places, you get you go on the website, you order the stuff, they ship it to you FedEx, comes in a box with a shipping label. You use them for a couple of days, a week, whatever you need. You put everything back in the box, you slap the shipping label on the top, and you send it back. You don't even have to drive anywhere. It comes right to your door. And it's cheaper. It's less expensive than, at least at the times that I looked, than going to my brick and mortar store, which is 2 miles away. So, bless their hearts. I know they do a lot of good support locally, and I do encourage people to check out their local camera stores where they're available. But if you're out in the boonies, or if you need something quick and easy, renting from a place like Lens Pro to Go is just simple. It's so easy, and I've done it quite a few times. We did it for our family vacation last time I went, because I wanted, like you said, extra reach, and I didn't want to go buy another lens.
Yeah, there's a lot of options out there. If you live in a city, man, you have a ton of choices, as opposed to where, like, I live out in the middle of nowhere. Mailing the lens to me is the only way I'm going to get it.
Right. And the other thing about them, at least in the United States, and I know there are more cropping up around the world. I know there are several up in England now. I don't know about Europe, but the fact that they're staffed with really good people. I mean, you can call and ask and say, well, I'm going to go like to, Yosemite. What kind of lenses should I take? And they ask you what body, so they have the skill to help you figure out what lenses you may even need. So it's great. Great service.
And they also, if you can get into B&H isn't necessarily a small local store, but they have really good help too. A lot of these camera stores will have a guy that either used to shoot or still does shoot professionally for other things, and this is sort of his part-time job. So he's able to answer questions about your camera, answer questions about lenses. If you're not really sure about setting up your camera or how to adjust your ISO, or some of the features are kind of hard to understand for you, if you go in, a lot of times they'll have like a once-a-week training class, or they'll have somebody there that if you're buying something, they'll gladly sit down and walk you through everything that you're buying, so that when you're done, you know how it all works. Whereas if you just go to Amazon or eBay or any of these other places and buy a new camera outright, you don't really get that. So you either need to know what it is, or you better be ready to learn what it is and how to use it right away. The other thing to check out, and I don't know if they do this in your area, Mitch, but in Denver, Colorado, once a year, the local camera shops get together and they do a sort of benefit thing with the zoo. And for $20 admission for any photographer, I think it's 20, it might be 25 now, but they let you in, and they have basically a giant table full of lenses. And as long as you stay inside of the zoo and pay the admission to the zoo, you can take any one of those lenses off the table to go shoot all over the entire zoo, and then come back to that table, turn it in, and get a different one. And they let you do this all day long. So it's a whole day of basically playing around with any lens you can think of. And you're in a zoo with animals and forested areas and stuff like that. So you can get a lot of really cool shots, and you get a lot of opportunity to really play around with that stuff and get used to the lens and decide if it's what you need.
That's cool. I've never heard of that. What's it called?
I don't remember the exact name of it. The one that I know of in my area is at the Denver Zoo. And I used to be Wolf Camera that sponsored it, but I believe the name of the company has changed that normally sponsors it. But it happens every year, and I believe it's like late in the fall when they do that, when like zoo attendance is down. I'll look it up and see if I can add it to the show notes, but I'm pretty sure they have something similar to that in Times Square in New York, or in not Times Square. What's the park in New York? The big one.
Central Park.
Central Park. Thank you.
Yeah.
Why that's escaping me today. I believe they have something similar in the Central Park area, and they kind of fence off a section. I don't know every place that they do this, but I've heard about it happening in Chicago and in a few other major metropolitan areas. So talk to your local camera store, and maybe they have an event like this, or maybe they have like a train the trainer type of thing where they, do classes for like $50 or $20 and let you play around with the camera store's lens collection. If you can get in on any of that, it's a really great way to play with a lot of really cool glass.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Now moving on down the line, and we're changing from lenses here because we've covered a lot of lenses.
We're not going to talk about lenses anymore.
Now we've got some corporate buyout business to talk about. Vitec, I believe that's how you pronounce it. They're known, Vitec. Yeah. They're known well for buying out Manfrotto and a number of other equipment manufacturers, tripods, and so on. They recently bought out Small HD. When was this? Like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago that they bought out Small HD?
Oh, it's actually been a month and a half now. Gosh, time flies when we're having fun.
So a month and a half ago, they bought out Small HD, and now they buy out Teradek as well as Paralinx. Those are both companies that provide wireless systems for HDMI transfer of video. Are we going to see?
Let me clarify something. They bought out Teradek last fall, so that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's
Paralinx was just recently acquired, like this week. They just made the announcement. Yeah.
So they now own the vast majority of these wireless transmitter systems. They own a major screen provider for filmmakers. Are we going to see a wireless integration of the Small HD monitors with maybe a Paralinx unit built in so that it's all in one?
I would love to see something like that, and Lord knows what they're going to do. I actually talked to Michael Galen, who works for Teradek. I always work with him at NAB, who, they do the big glass booth, and Michael and I and Michael Artsis do a live show, which we'll talk about as NAB gets closer. But I asked him, I said, these two companies, Teradek and Paralinx, are doing very similar things. Do you think that Vitec is just going to squish them into one unit or not? And his belief is that they're going to keep them as separate entities because Paralinx tends to deal with a slightly different consumer base than Teradek does. Teradek is going more cinema, whereas Paralinx is lower end, and so he thinks they're going to stay kind of separate. But with Vitec owning like 15 companies now, I mean, they own light panels and, like you said, Manfrotto, and it's not Tiffin, but there's another.
Well, they own in the tripod department alone. They own O'Connor. They own
right.
Gitzo. Or, I never pronounce that right. Is it Gitzo? Is that how you say it? Gitzo.
Yeah, Gitzo works.
And a couple others. So they have a huge chunk because that's kind of the high-end tripod down to the mid-range and lower-price tripods. And it seems like with Teradek and Paralinx, you're kind of seeing the same thing. Teradek, like you said, is the kind of top end. Their units are in the $2,000 or $3,000 range, whereas I believe Paralinx Low is offering the Aero. If they still have that out, I don't know if it's still available or not. That was in the $900 or $800 range. So there's definitely a price difference between the two.
Yep. And it's interesting because I think Vitec is ending up consolidating a lot of the business functions. Like Michael Galen used to work strictly for Teradek, and I think now he's going to be doing more promotion for several of the other brands. So they kind of maybe are working the back office stuff in consolidation there, but they're still keeping most of these brands separate. But it does, like you say, allow for the opportunity for some intermingling of some technology that maybe wouldn't have happened before. We'll just have to see.
Well, there are a lot of ways to save, even if they don't combine products. If their manufacturing facilities can be done in one place as opposed to multiple places. And like you said, the sales team is a big thing. If each company had its own sales team, that's a lot of overhead for each of the companies individually, but if they can combine it into one group, they can have a larger sales team, and still cut down on the number of people that they're employing and still maintain the amount of interaction with the public. Also, for events like NAB, I mean, maybe we'll see all these booths kind of crammed together, and they'll get a larger buy-in for their tripod and lenses, or tripod and monitors and all that stuff.
They do tend to be very close together at NAB. Although if you don't know that Vitec owns them, you probably don't really realize it, because each one has its own separate little section like every other booth does.
Now, speaking of Teradek and Vitec property, let's talk about this next article down here. The Teradek video is a VIDIU.
They call it the VIDIU, yes.
The VIDIU, I was looking at this because that was announced earlier this week, and then also the Broadcaster Mini. The Teradek unit is a HDMI transmitting device that basically beams your stuff out via Wi-Fi to tablets, and then they have a controller app of some kind that goes along with that. The Broadcaster Mini does a similar thing. Not quite the same, because it looks like Teradek has some advanced software options for switching and so on that you can incorporate into that. But the price difference here, we're talking $295 for the Broadcaster Mini and $499 for the Teradek VIDIU. What do you know about these, Mitch? Because they look really similar.
They are somewhat similar, and I first of all will say that I'm not an expert in all of this wireless technology yet, but the more it's coming about, the more we need to learn it and use it. And just as a clarification, because I love clarifying stuff for you, we're actually talking about the VIDIU Mini, which was announced this week. They did already have the VIDIU, and so this is a Mini. And then the other one's also the Mini. I have to switch pages because I all of a sudden can't. The Broadcaster Mini.
Yeah, that's right. I left the Mini out of the show notes. Right. The Broadcaster Mini. They also have a Broadcaster Pro, and Teradek has the VIDIU and then the VIDIU Mini.
Right. And Teradek has quite a few other things. They have the Cube and the whatever. I've forgotten. There are so many of them. But the key here that I really think, and there is a price difference, but the VIDIU Mini can serve up to 4 different cameras. And let me rephrase that. So with the VIDIU Mini, you have to also buy the iPad/iPhone app, right? Which is the controller function. And the controller function, it's $99, so the app itself costs you. But you buy the app, and let's say you buy 4 of the VIDIU Minis, and you're a very rich young man, and you've got a lot of money to throw at a particular product. So you can control all 4 of those VIDIU Minis with one iPad app, and then broadcast that out, okay? Now, that's different, I believe, than the Broadcaster Mini, which is Livestream's product, because the Broadcaster Mini can only handle one camera. It's just one camera out. And so, yes, the VIDIU Mini costs more, but it also, like you said, has more functionality, can control up to 4 cameras. And the other functionality that's in there that I haven't totally understood, but yeah, I was talking to Michael Artsis about this yesterday, and again, he's my co-host on the NAB live show. He says that the thing that's really cool about the VIDIU Mini is that it is using your cell service. And so you can actually go out and you're going to have a little bit lower quality, obviously, because you're not going to be using Wi-Fi. But the Broadcaster Mini doesn't use cell service. It only uses Wi-Fi, my understanding. And therefore, if you need to be out in the wild and have cell phone service, or if you're at NAB, for example, and you don't have access to Wi-Fi, I mean, the Wi-Fi usage at NAB is insane. Of course, cell usage at NAB is also crazy, so you may not have a great cell signal. but you can do, and we're Michael and I are talking about possibly doing a broadcast from the outside with the Video Mini live through the cell service. So we're going to experiment with that and see how well it works. It's kind of cool.
Now I'm looking into the Broadcaster Mini just to kind of see what the differences are, and it does look like the Broadcaster Mini with their app also available. It sends the video to your phone, and then your phone sends it out. Is that how the Teradek works, or does the Teradek actually have a adapter or a cell phone modem built into it?
I believe it's going out through your phone.
No.
Again,
Okay,
I haven't gotten completely into the whole thing, but I didn't see a cell option on the live stream, but maybe I just missed it.
Yeah, I'm looking at both of them
The
side by side,
Broadcaster Mini.
and the Broadcaster Mini and the Teradek Video Mini both basically set up a hotspot. Your phone connects to it, and then they send out your video via your cell phone's connection, is what it looks like. I don't know as much about the Teradek Video, but the Broadcaster Mini uses your cell phone or a Wi-Fi network to connect. So that part looks pretty similar. The part that caught me off guard when I was staring at both of these side by side is that the graphics on the actual device itself looked so similar to each other that I was like, well, wait a minute, were these made in the same place, and then one company just didn't want to spend quite as much money, and so that's the Broadcaster Mini, and then the company that thought they wanted to add a few more features, Teradek, makes the Video Mini, because even the battery indicator and the circle that's on the Teradek, those are all on the Mini, so it's like, man, these guys look really similar. What is going on here, And even their Pro, I'm looking at the Broadcaster Pro and the Teradek Pro, and they both have that kind of display screen with the transmit rate and how long you've been live and the start and stop and the menu system. These do look like they're cut from the same cloth. I wonder what the story is behind that.
Well, it's quite common for people to purchase stuff from original equipment manufacturers, OEMs. It's actually, and I think you've noticed it too before in some of the reports you've done on monitors. Or LED lights, for example. Those are quite commonly made by a small group of companies and then sold and put a label of XYZ company on the top.
I'm currently using an Apple B-stock panel that was shoved into a brand that is basically, it goes Shimamon. I'm going to actually flip this around so you guys can see. That Shimamon, this is a 2560 by 1440 IPS panel, and when Apple first released their 2560 by 1440 panel, theirs was $1,000, and the panels that did not make the cut for Apple's QA ended up going into these, and these are $300. And the screen looks nice, but it comes in a really cheap plastic case. It's missing speakers. There's buttons on the case that don't actually do anything at all. They're just on the case, and the only way to color calibrate it is to hook up something like one of those Spider 3 or Spider 3 Pros or Spider 4s to like color calibrate the screen. But once you do that, it looks beautiful. So that's a good example. I also pulled the card on, I believe it was, actually I've got it right here, the Aspen lav mics. Theirs look incredibly similar to JK's lav mics. These are $60, and the JK lav mics are $30. They have the same clip. The only thing that's different is the Aspen uses a little bit thicker cable wire than the JK, so you're paying an extra $30 for the possibility of maybe a little bit of noise rejection if you have your cell phone next to the cable. Otherwise, spend less and get the same thing, you know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. It's just like getting the generic brand when you go to the grocery store and buy cereal.
Either way, though, I think both of these, Teradek's offering as well as the Broadcaster Mini, they both look pretty cool. And for $295 and $495 respectively, or $499 respectively, they will probably find a home for a lot of people. In the past, people have been using hacks like the USB tethering for Canon cameras to broadcast your video, but you're talking frame rates of like 15 frames a second and huge delays. I'm guessing there's still going to be a little bit of latency on this because it is using Wi-Fi, but with this sort of thing, at least now you'll have a full frame rate and transcoding happening inside of the device before it's sent over Wi-Fi to go back to your device to monitor. So that's really cool. And you know, $295, that's about the price of what you'd spend on, I don't know, a panel or a monitor or something like that. And you probably already have a tablet or a cell phone in your house that you could use to monitor your video.
Yeah. My understanding was that these boxes, at least on the Teradek side, are not specifically designed to do monitoring. I think they want you to buy the more expensive one, like the Video or the Bolt.
Okay.
I don't understand the scientific behind it, or the science behind it, I should say, because Michael said that these aren't specifically for monitoring. The app is there. You can see what's going on in the app, but you're not getting a full HD signal when you're watching it inside the app.
So, okay.
So again, there are so many little technical nuances here that have to be learned just by using them, and we haven't gotten our hands on one yet. But I at least have to throw that caveat out there that I'm not sure that you can do full monitoring with this. Now, if you don't care if it's 480, maybe that's all right. You know, maybe you just want to make sure that the signal is working and what's going on, as opposed to having a full HD signal. If you want a full HD signal, I know you've got to go into the more expensive units.
Well, the Broadcaster Mini, it is doing a ton of compression on the fly inside the device. So just like the Logitech webcam that I'm using right here, this is the 930E, if anybody is wondering. That thing, the reason it's so great for this sort of application is because inside of the box itself, it has a transcoder that's taking the HD signal that's coming in and dropping it down to something in the 2 to 4 meg range and then sending it out. The Broadcaster Mini states in the spec list that it's basically taking whatever it's getting from the HDMI port and compressing it down to a 4 megabit per second signal, which is pretty highly compressed. I believe the compression used on YouTube is in the 6 or 8 megabits per second range, so you're going to be crunching your video up further than you would if you were uploading it to YouTube. So for recording purposes, probably not great, and for any sort of major accuracy, I'm guessing you're going to be a little bit out of luck. But it's still pretty cool that they can send this stuff over Wi-Fi. So definitely check both of those out. There's a link in the show notes. Mitch has a really good write-up over on Planet 5D on that Teradek Video Mini and Broadcaster Mini. I did not actually find any write-up. I got an email directly from them about their device. So that's how I ended up knowing about that. One more thing on the list, and this is actually really cool before we move down the line, and this is the GH4 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8 OIS versus Olympus EM5 Mark II. Now, the reason they're using that specific lens is because the GH4 does not have in-body camera stabilization. But a lot of people really think that the lens stabilization that's available with Panasonic lenses is really awesome. The Olympus, on the other hand, has in-body 5-axis stabilization. And this video, and you can find that in the show notes, is a really telling story about how good Olympus is doing image stabilization. Mitch, did you watch this video?
I watched it. I did not watch every second because it's like 20 minutes or something. It's crazy long.
I played it in the background while I was, doing breakfast this morning. I loved it so much.
And the same, it's kind of awesome because the first half of the video is the two cameras side by side. I don't know how they mounted them, but they're obviously mounted together. The person who shot the video is outdoors on a bridge somewhere, so you get a really wide vista, and then you have him run up and down the staircases, and so you get to see very shaky motion in the GH4 versus the Olympus, which is pretty dadgum steady. It's pretty amazing. And then the second half of the video, they actually put, and why am I not coming up with it? The software stabilization. What's it called?
Image stabilization, it's warp stabilization, I believe, is
Warp,
the
thank
Adobe
you.
version.
Yeah, it's the Adobe, and even that did a horrible job, relatively speaking, of stabilizing that footage compared to the Olympus. I mean, the Olympus, with the sensor stabilization built in, is just blowing me away.
Yeah, so what the mounting setup that Mitch is talking about, they actually bolted basically a single rod, and they bolted both cameras to that rod, and then they had a small monopod with a handle attached to that. And then the guy just starts walking around with it. And the cameras, since they're both mounted exactly to the same plane, are experiencing the same amount of motion, the same amount of vibration, and everything else. And he's turning corners and walking downstairs and doing all these, moves with the cameras. And the GH4 and 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8 is just kind of falling apart, whereas the Olympus EM5 Mark II just, it's so smooth and silky and
It's amazing.
everything. Oh man, it really, even though, okay, one thing though, and I don't, did you notice this? The video quality. Was there, to me it seemed like there was a bit of a difference in image quality from the Olympus to the GH4, but the Olympus was so much smoother. Did you see that, or was I just imagining that?
I was curious about it, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time examining it side by side. But the problem with this particular test is that both cameras don't have the same lens attached.
That's true.
So, I mean, I've been beaten about the face and the head several times where I've tried to do a side-by-side comparison and post it on YouTube, and everybody screams at me, "You didn't use the same lens." So if you're not using the same lens, how can we tell the difference? So that's the thing that bothered me about this test. I did notice, like when they stopped and looked at that sign that had the lettering on it, was
Yeah.
Japanese and English. There were certain segments of that the Olympus looked fuzzier, but when the camera was absolutely stable, they both looked equally as sharp to me. So I think there's a little bit of uh, fuzziness that comes in from the stabilization of the sensor itself while the camera is physically moving a lot. But again, I haven't had my hands on one, so I don't know exactly what's causing that. But I did notice that they weren't exactly as sharp, and I wondered if it was the lens, because they really need to be the same in order to really, really, really judge that.
Well, not necessarily the lens differences, but the GH4 with the 12 to 35 millimeter with the IS turned on. When I tested that originally, probably about 8 months or 9 months ago, the IS seemed to like really make the image for the GH4 softer, a lot like noticeably softer and fuzzier than I was expecting. Now, with the Olympus system, they're not moving a device inside the lens and vibrating it. They're actually physically moving the sensor around. So maybe you're right, Mitch. Maybe because the sensor is actually, doing one of these as it's catching up with the motion, the actual movement of the sensor at 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second or 24 frames a second is enough to give a bit of motion blur until it really stabilizes out.
The other thing that, and I was just going to pull this up because I don't have it in front of me right now, but weren't two different sides? One is, it looks to me, the recording format, it says down at the bottom, it says 50/m/30p. Does the 50 mean the shutter speed?
No, that's the megabits per second
Oh,
that they're
okay.
capturing at.
So what
So,
they didn't say was whether both were set to the same shutter speed,
so the
at least
Olympus
on
is set
Sony.
to 30 meg codec at 30p, and the Panasonic GH4 is set to 50 megabit codec at 30p. So that may also be the reason that we're seeing a little bit of difference in
Could be.
image quality. It does state here, though, that they're using the Olympus 12 to 40 millimeter on the Olympus camera and the Panasonic 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8. So those aren't the same lenses, but for the most part, and I've tested these side by side, they're really close in image quality. A lot of people would say that it's so close that you choose which one you like better based on other factors besides the lens quality itself.
Right.
I didn't find enough of a difference to make that probably be my linchpin. But the codec that they're using, that's a fairly big difference in the amount of data they're capturing from one camera to the other. So
very true.
that could be it. And I didn't actually read through the show notes until Mitch mentioned them. I just watched the video on repeat a couple of times because I was like, wow. The Olympus EM5 is one of those cameras that I've hovered over buying like 3 or 4 times. And I was talking to Robert on Twitter the other day because Robert just got one in. He lives in Vegas, and he gets to test a lot of camera gear. And he was telling me that he loves it for stills because even in low light, he gets better performance out of it than his GH4, but he was complaining about the menu system. He said the menu system was horrible to use. It was really cumbersome, and that for setting up anything with video, you were really just trying to get through to figure out where stuff was at to get it sorted.
Yeah.
That sounds a little bit scary. I don't know if that's enough to deter people, though, with this sort of image stabilization. It's beautiful.
Here's what I have to say about Ucky menus. There you go. There's some sound effects for you. I honestly have trouble with the Nikon menus, but I'm not like a native Nikon user. So when I go switch over to a Nikon, it's like, how does that work again? So if the Olympus is just really bad, I'm not looking forward to that. But again, I haven't had my hands on one yet, so I don't know.
Even as a native Canon shooter, getting into some of those more crazy back of the camera menus on that last thing with the tools, and you start getting down, and then each one you click on it, and then you have like 8 other things inside of the thing. That's, you know, I was trying to do some focus adjustments on a lens a couple years ago, and I messed around in that section of the menu system for a good hour before I even figured out where I was at and what I was up to.
It's very true, and there are certain functions where I can't find them once I've done them because you don't use them often enough. You're like, where in the world was that?
Yeah, Magic Lantern was that way as well. If you're a Magic Lantern user, trying to sort through like, okay, I just changed the headphone output level. Where was that at again?
Yeah.
And does the glowing light mean that it's on? And then sometimes you'd click on something and you'd get like a sub menu with like 5 things and a weird little set of circles, and you're like, which circle am I using here? I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, you've got something in the show notes here, and this is from Rode, and this is actually pretty exciting. Tell us about the Rode Reel project.
They did this last year as well, and it turned into what they're calling the largest film contest ever. They had entries from like 90 different countries, and it's just crazy insane. And they were giving away last year, well, I believe it was $100,000 in prizes, and this year they've doubled it. They're up at $200,000. And let me say that again: $200,000 in prize money, prize gear. Okay, I don't think any of it's money. I think it's all gear. But they've got Red Rock Micro, and they've got Zeiss, and they've got just bazillions of people that have donated gear for this particular contest, and it's really rather simple. It's a 3-minute submission. Can't be any longer than 3 minutes. The only real caveat is that you have to use Rode gear, and you do have to do a behind-the-scenes video with it as well, showing how you used some portion of some piece of Rode microphones in order to shoot the short. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty simple to do, and your shot at some piece of $200,000 worth of gear is pretty awesome.
That is pretty sweet. One thing to note, guys, if you ever win any prizes, make sure you have the money to pay the taxes on the prizes.
Amen.
Because a lot of these contests, and they're really awesome, and they give you a lot of gear and stuff, and that's great. But the problem you run into is whatever the value is for the prize you win, you have to pay whatever the tax amount is on that. And if there's no cash to go with the physical items that are being given to you, then you have to pay, I believe it's somewhere in the range of 25% up front, and then based on your total income tax, you have to pay that out for the cost of the items. That's why a lot of the people that win, like I believe the house channel or the home channel or whatever has a giveaway house where it's like $1 million home, but no one ever ends up keeping the $1 million home because
they can't
afford the taxes that they have to pay for winning $1 million home, because the tax is like $300,000. This isn't nearly as substantial, but that's a lot of really cool gear and a lot of stuff. and you're probably going to have to sell a few things to pay your taxes after you win this. So just keep that in mind that you don't get audited by the IRS if you're in the United States. Other countries, I have no idea how that works. So make sure you check with your tax laws. But this is really cool. Last year's road reel, 1,000 people, I believe, submitted, or more than 1,000, and it was some pretty cool stuff. And the winners, didn't they do a music video as well in some sort of, or was that the same thing?
That was the road. I think that was the same road reel thing. I know Road did something. Maybe it was a different thing, but they actually got to go shoot a video down in Australia.
Yeah, I know there was a music video version as well where they got a couple of directors from various projects to come in and work and kind of teach the person that won the contest, and help them with whatever equipment they wanted, and then provide a band, and then they shot an awesome music video. So Rode's really doing some really cool stuff. They've really built up a lot of happy customers in the film community, and stuff like the Video Mic Pro that I use, the original Video Mic, this Procaster that I have in front of me. Mitch is using a Rode mic. They're really producing some good mics. And on a side note, Rode does not sponsor me. I believe they are a sponsor of Planet 5D, so they do some good stuff, and that's me saying that without getting paid for it. So I like Rode stuff a lot, and they do some. Actually, I'm looking at my camera, and I have a Rode logo laying here in the background. So there you go, guys. Well worth investing in. Definitely check out that competition. There is a lot of sweet gear in that short film competition, and it also gives you some practice to make a film.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm saying to myself that it's something I ought to do.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be fair for me to work on something like this, but I kind of, when I saw this, I was like, I could do a 3-minute short that would probably get it placed in this.
You're not sponsored by them, so why not?
That's true. Maybe I'll think about it. I'll talk to my guys and see what we can come up with.
Some horror thing where you chop some people up and there's lots of blood spurting everywhere. That would be really awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a little less blood and guts for something like this. I don't think I'm going to win anybody over with that.
Well, I'm just mad because they didn't pick me to be one of the judges. So don't enter. Don't anybody enter because Rode sucks. No.
Whoa. Now, speaking of disappointing, we've got a few discussion topics, and we're running a little bit long, so I won't hit all of them. But really? I've got this guy right here, and I was kind of super excited about this earlier last week. If you guys saw me kind of blogging and talking about it on the cast and some other things. This is the Smallrig A7S minimalist rig, and I've been using this for a couple days now because I just got it in, and here's the thing that I am very disappointed with. This is fully tensioned as tight as it'll go on the arm grip, and watch this.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so it'll hold itself in place as long as there's not a lot of force, but you start moving around and it'll fall back and forth. And that is something that does not work for me. I discovered this last night when I was testing different monitors with the A7S. I put the Must HD, I believe it's a 1280 panel, onto this camera, and that's, if you guys are familiar with the Must HD display, it's a 5-inch or 5.6-inch display, and it's got really good resolution, but it's one of the bulkier 5-inch-esque displays on the market. Has a 2-battery unit on the back, so it's a little bit heavier in that respect. It's a fairly large monitor. It's very thick, and it has a great sun hood that pops out, but the sun hood is also very thick and very bulky. And as soon as I put that on there, it nearly flipped off of the rig and flew down to the bottom of the hang, and that is not good. So I've been emailing Smallrig on this and kind of letting them know what's going on, and they did tell me that they are working on a fix for that. So there might be a solution. Also, one of the other things I found on this rig that you got to be careful with, and I thought I'd mention that, I still like the design and stuff. I probably will not be using that arm in the near term, but if you look closely, and I'll show you this for the audio listeners, we're at an hour 4, so you can check that on the video. There's a little plastic gasket right there, and that plastic gasket is kind of a tensioner to hold this clamp shut. and it does a good job, but if you over tighten it, it will bulge out and no longer provide the same amount of clamping force on the deal.
Wow.
So with this clamp right here, when you want to attach it, and I'll slide this on the video here, you want to just snug it up, but you don't want to over tighten it. And once it's snug, I'm just tapping this in a little bit. It's nice and solid, and it doesn't slide around, but you don't want to crank on that, because if you crank on it, that washer and that plastic bit there will compress, and then it won't do as good a job as clamping. And that may be what happened with this clamp right here. I did not know that was a problem until I started playing around with this guy. So they are working on it. That is sort of disappointing, and I'll mess around with it some more, and I have a write-up on this coming up pretty shortly, so that should be out today or tomorrow, and I'll talk more about what's going on with that. But yeah, the EVF from Smallrig, not my favorite right now, so hopefully they fix that or something comes up that makes that a little bit better. Mitch, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on in the discussion topics?
No, but I do have a pick when we get there.
All right, let's move on to the picks then.
Okay. For those of you who may be interested, there's a company that actually is based here in St. Louis, and I've met them, and there's some really great guys called F-Stop Bags. Now, F-Stop gets used everywhere, so I kind of really am angry with them for having that name, but that's their own problem. They make some awesome bags, camera bags, and I have a backpack, and I won't try to go through and show you, but the thing that's really awesome about it is that the inside part is completely removable. So all of the places where you shove your camera, and, the little widgets where you stretch things apart and all that kind of stuff, that whole thing is an insert that comes out. And when I travel, and I'm going somewhere for a day or a day and a half or 2 days or something, I can take the insert out, use that as my carry-on with a camera gear in it, and then I also have the backpack where I shove my clothes in. So when I get to where I'm going, I take my clothes out, and then I use the entire backpack as a camera bag. So that's really cool. What they have just announced is that they're doing a Kickstarter project where they call it the Kit Century, and that's S-E-N-T-R-Y, not century. But so what they're doing, and you go look at the Planet 5D blog post, which is in the show notes. What they're doing is they're creating an RFID chip kind of process where you can chip all of the things in your kit, and then your iPhone or iPad app will tell you whether or not all your stuff is there, or if something gets stolen while you're on set, you'll realize that somebody has taken something from your bag, and you'll go running and screaming and go, "Who just took my lens?" or whatever. It's a really cool concept. The second side of that is that, let's say you are going to go out on a shoot and you normally would have, your 24-105 and a microphone and your 5D Mark III. You can set up a quote-unquote kit. And if you don't have all the pieces in your kit in the bag, you'll get an alert that says you're leaving the house without your battery and your microphone, or whatever the pieces are that aren't in that particular kit. You can set up multiple kits in their software. So it's some really cool stuff, and I urge you to dive in deep. We don't have time to go into it right now, but the concept is really cool. And look at that over in Planet 5D, the Kit Century Kickstarter project from F-Stop.
And again, that's S-E-N-T-R-Y, Century, right, not the C version. That looks really cool. So it's just RFID, right? So you can't do GPS tracking of the gear once it's stolen. Yes. You just know that it's gone. Can. Oh, you can. Yes. So you can track it on top of.
They have multiple different segments of this kit depending upon which level you want to buy. The first one is just simple RFID with Wi-Fi or something. But the second upper level actually has GPS tracking in it. So yes, you can do that.
Oh man, that is sexy. That's a really good deal.
It's a really cool project, and I'm going to be working with them because, like I said, they're here in St. Louis, and I've met them several times. I hope to get in their beta project for that, so I'm really looking forward to see how that works.
Now, not to quiz you too much more on it, how do you power them? Are they just they're just powered by Wi-Fi signal, or do they need a battery of some kind, or how does it charge?
So there's there's three components to the deal. There's all of the chips, the RFID chips or whatever,
Okay.
the other one with the Wi-Fi signal, however that works. And I'm not, again, an electronic genius there, but there is a unit that you put in your bag. It's a small, a little sort of like about the size of a cigarette pack. That is the device that tracks all of those things. And then, of course, the third part of the component is your iPhone or iPad or whatever, Android device, which has all the software and all that kind of stuff. So it's the little cigarette device that's in your backpack or your bag or whatever. And it doesn't have to be an f-stop bag. You can put these things in whatever kind of bag you have. So it's not just strictly up to their particular models. But that's the device that you have to have in your unit. And you're going to hide it somewhere so that most people, like a thief, isn't going to know. If they take, two lenses out of your bag, they think you're just stealing the lenses. But because they have left the proximity of that device that's in your bag, then you're going to get an alert on your phone that somebody just stole your lenses. And it'll tell you which ones they stole.
That's pretty cool, man. I'm going to have to check that out.
It is cool.
And the tracking thing also is really nice because if you look behind me, these shelves full of gear are where my gear sits when I unload my bags. And when I unload my bags, lenses and stuff go all over the place, and I'm not as organized as I could be with where my things end up. So then I'm like, man, I'm about to go shoot this project. Where did I put, my 51.2? Where is that at? And I wander around back and forth for a half an hour, or I keep my batteries, for example, in a bag. And the bag is I always throw the bag in with whatever camera uses that particular type of battery. And sometimes I'll take it upstairs or something to shoot something, and then I'll be downstairs packing a bag, and I can't find that little bag. And it would be awesome to have some kind of ID tag on that so that I know where my freaking battery bag is when I'm looking for it. And on set, that's also an issue because, man, people, when I'm like, hey, grab a battery out of that bag, it's the brown bag that says Canon LPE6 on it, get me 2 batteries out of there, and then take these batteries and put them on the charger. Well, instead of doing what you asked to bring you the battery, they bring you the entire brown bag, and they're like, here you go, now you don't have to worry about it. Well, then what? You're shooting inside, you go to outside, you set the bag down somewhere, and you're like, where the hell are my batteries at? I can't find them. So that's really cool. I'm excited about that one, actually. I'm going to go check that out after the cast. My pick of the week is this guy right here, and it's not nearly as exciting as Mitch's sweet lens tracking system. This is a Polaroid pistol grip, and you can buy these for about $6 to $12 on Amazon, and I'll have a link in the show notes there. It's basically a handle grip for something like your GoPro, so you can mount a GoPro on here, and you can walk around like this if you want to. You can mount it to the bottom of a camcorder or whatever, but also the legs flip out on the bottom. And you flip the legs out, and now you have a basic, very simple tripod to set your GoPro up or set your camera up. So if you need to take a shot from somewhere or you want to stabilize the camera or whatever, you have these little wings that make it pretty easy to use. This is really cheap. It fits in your bag, and it's got a 1/4-20 thumb screw with a little nubbin right here so that when you attach it to your camera, you can just screw this on, snap it into place, and then walk around like so. It's not the most technically advanced device in the world, but for $7 to $12, it's handy to have, especially if you're a GoPro shooter and you just need to set the camera up somewhere and talk into the camera for a second or something like that. So definitely check that out. That's the Polaroid pistol grip adapter, and they're available on B&H or on Amazon. Both of Mitch and I's picks will be in the show notes. Mitch, where can people find you?
Well, I don't know. There are several places where they can find me, but there is a website that's called... It's also called...
Planet 5D.
Oh, wait, that's the same name. Planet5D.com is where you can find me. I also have planetmitch.com, and I would like to issue a special goodbye, if I may, to all of our listeners, because it's been a really great show, and I enjoy talking to you.
Goodbye, dear.
Goodbye.
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 But when will I see you again?
Oh, never. Never.
That's the worst
Never.
goodbye I've ever heard. And you stole it from a movie.
Thanks, DJ.
Mitch is getting a little crazy with the samples there. You can find me on DSLRFilmNoob.com. You can also find this podcast on iTunes or on SoundCloud or anywhere else that podcasts are delivered under DSLR Film Noob Podcast. You can also check us out on r/DSLR DSLR on Reddit, and be sure to swing by the YouTube channel to watch this live if you're not a regular listener and you prefer to view. All those things are great, and of course, Mitch and I are both on Twitter, so go over there and interact with us. Like I told you in another cast, you can get a hold of me faster that way. I even have a guy right now that's hounding me to answer his emails via Twitter, so good job. That's very clever. I would have not thought to do that. On that note, thanks for listening to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. And that concludes the audio portion of the podcast.